Imagine walking into a cathedral whose ceilings whisper stories of donations, whose walls echo sermons about prosperity, and yet outside those walls, communities beg for basic care. Today, you're not just an audience, you're witnesses. We're about to pull back the velvet curtain on the dark world of megachurches. They say sunlight is the best disinfectant, but too often we sit in the dark, hands clasped in prayer, eyes closed, heads bowed, not in reverence but in silence, silence that lets the rot fester, silence that turns complicity into culture. You see, there comes a moment when silence is no longer spiritual. It is cowardice masquerading as faith. We've been told not to question. We've been told to touch not the anointed. But what happens when the anointed exploit the unquestioning? What happens when the sacred pulpit becomes the loudest platform for manipulation, masked as inspiration? There is a world many dare not speak of, a world of grand auditoriums, diamond rings flashing in the spotlight, private jets parked beside private sermons. This isn't faith, this is theater, and we, the audience, have been too polite to walk out, but we must talk about it, because truth, no matter how inconvenient, is the first step to liberation. And if your faith cannot withstand inspection, it was never rooted in truth. There is a darkness cloaked in choirs and charisma, one that thrives in blind obedience, and it survives because we've been taught that questioning is rebellion, not responsibility. So let's speak plainly. Power in the modern church doesn't flow from scriptures. It flows from influence, and influence is built on perception. You build a brand, not a belief. You gather followers, not disciples. You entertain, you inspire, and somewhere along the line, you begin to monetize morality. Suddenly, the church is not a place of healing. It's a business of hope, sold one sermon at a time, and the worst part, people give willingly. They give from lack, hoping for abundance. They give from pain, hoping for healing. They give from fear, hoping for favor. And behind the veil of spiritual guidance stands a machinery, engineered to sell dreams and silence dissent. The more you give, the more righteous you're told you are. And if your breakthrough doesn't come, it's not because the system failed, it's because your faith wasn't strong enough. That's how the blame is shifted. That's how the structure protects itself, not through doctrine, but through shame, not through accountability, but through charisma. But I'm here to tell you, empowerment doesn't come through submission to men. It comes through awakening within yourself. It comes through the courage to ask, where does my money go? Who benefits when I sacrifice? What fruit does this tree really bear? Empowerment starts with the uncomfortable, with the moment you no longer confuse inspiration for manipulation, when you understand that the truth doesn't need to be shouted, it just needs to be spoken, and the moment you choose to speak it, the power begins to shift. See, the game only works when people play their part in silence, when they stay quiet about the abuse, the greed, the psychological control disguised as prophecy. It thrives in dark corners and behind closed doors, but expose it, and suddenly the emperor stands without clothes. This is not an attack on faith. Faith is powerful. It is personal. It is pure. But what we see too often in these megachurch institutions is not faith. It's a product, a packaged experience sold to the desperate, and it's time we stopped mistaking volume for virtue. Just because someone screams amen doesn't mean they live by the word. Just because someone fills a stadium doesn't mean they're filled with truth. So here's the charge: be bold, not bitter, not broken. Bold, because those who challenge the system are not enemies of the church. They are the reason the church can heal. You cannot fix what you will not face, and you cannot lead people to light if you keep them in darkness. Expose the rot, not for revenge, but for renewal. Speak not to destroy, but to disrupt the cycle of deception. Your voice is your weapon. Your questions are your shield. And your courage, your audacity to stand and see, is what will bring light where darkness once reigned, because if no one speaks, nothing changes. But when one voice rises, it dares others to do the same. That's how empires fall, and that's how truth wins. There's something dangerously seductive about applause. It starts as affirmation, but over time it becomes addiction. One amen turns into 1,000. One follower turns into millions. One message becomes a movement. And before long, you're no longer preaching the gospel. You're performing, you're curating, you're building a brand, not building people. This is not the faith of old. This is not the raw, humble cry of a soul seeking truth. This is something else entirely. something polished, packaged, marketed. You see it in the way some leaders walk onto stage, not to serve but to be seen. They don't carry the weight of wisdom, they carry the glow of celebrity, and yes, we enable it, we feed it, we fall in love with the performance and forget to inspect the purpose. The moment the messenger becomes more important than the message, you've entered the cult of personality. It starts subtly. You quote them more than scripture. You reference their sayings like gospel. Their photos are everywhere. Their voice, their tone, their style, it becomes the template for truth. You don't question them, because questioning feels like betrayal, and that's the danger. When admiration turns into idolization, the truth gets buried beneath charisma. But charisma is not character, and applause is not accountability. There are those who stand on pulpits not because they've been called, but because they've been crowned. By fame, not by faith. They don't build leaders, they build dependents. People who look up, but never look within. People who cheer, but never challenge. Because if you challenge them, you're accused of dishonor. You're told to submit. You're told you lack faith. But let me tell you this. Blind submission is not faith. It is fear. And fear is the soil where manipulation thrives. Ask yourself, why is it that some churches crumble the moment the leader falls? Why is it that the scandal of one man can silence an entire movement? It's because the foundation was never solid. It was built not on principles, but on personality. The message became synonymous with the man, and when the man stumbled, so did the faith of millions. Real leadership doesn't need a stage. It doesn't demand loyalty, it earns it. It doesn't silence dissent, it welcomes it. Because truth isn't fragile, truth doesn't break when it's tested, it grows stronger. But we don't want truth, we want spectacle, we want lights, cameras, perfection. We want the polished Instagram reel, not the raw reality. And so, we become complicit in creating false gods out of flawed men. We raise them so high they forget how to walk among us. We give them so much power, they forget they were meant to serve, not rule. When a leader starts surrounding themselves with people who only clap, they stop growing. When questions are treated as attacks, that's not leadership. It's tyranny in religious robes. And when your loyalty is measured by your silence, you are no longer in a church, you're in a cult. It is time to break the illusion, to separate the voice of God from the voice of man, to stop confusing volume with vision. Some of the loudest voices are the most hollow. Some of the most followed are the least faithful. And if your spiritual growth depends entirely on one man's charisma, you are building your house on sand. Leadership must be accountable. Influence must be examined. And faith must be anchored in something far deeper than a brand. You do not need a superstar to find salvation. You do not need a celebrity pastor to validate your walk with God. You need courage. Courage to question. Courage to see. Courage to break free from personalities that promise heaven but deliver control. Because the cult of personality is not about faith. It is about ego. It is about control. And it ends the same way every time, with disillusioned followers, shattered trust, and silence where once there was hope. So stop worshiping the man in the spotlight. Start seeking the truth in the silence. If your belief system collapses when a preacher falls, then it was never belief. It was brand loyalty. And you, my friend, are worth more than that. Reclaim your faith. Reclaim your voice, and never again let someone else's personality eclipse your own power to think, to see, and to choose. Money. The one topic nobody wants to talk about in church, unless they're asking for it. But let's be real for a second. In every other sector of life, business, government, even charity, we demand transparency. We ask questions. We check the numbers. We hold people accountable. Yet when it comes to church, when it comes to our deepest convictions, we're told to give without question, to trust without proof, and to believe that asking about money is a sign of weak faith. No, it's a sign of intelligence, because money is not just currency. It is trust, it is energy, it is sacrifice. When people give their money, they're not just dropping notes into a basket. They're investing in something they believe is sacred. They are funding a future. The least they deserve is to know where it goes. But let's tell the truth. Too many megachurches operate like empires with no board, no audits, no accountability. The offering basket circulates every Sunday. Building funds are announced. Emergency campaigns are launched. Yet the congregation remains in the dark. Meanwhile, The same pastors who ask for faith drive luxury vehicles, live in multi-million-dollar homes, and fly private while preaching sacrifice, and when people ask questions, they're labeled rebellious, disrespectful, carnal, because the system was never built to serve the people. It was built to protect the pulpit. Let me say it straight. If your pastor is a CEO, your church is a business, and if it's a business, then it must follow business standards, transparency, governance, auditing. You cannot demand blind trust while refusing open books. You cannot use spirituality as a shield against scrutiny. It's not about being against wealth. No. Wealth, when earned with integrity, is a beautiful thing. But when that wealth is built on the backs of the poor, when the widow's last coin funds a jet, when the unemployed man tithes into a system that won't even buy him bread, that's not divine blessing, that's exploitation. Ask yourself, why do so many churches refuse to publish financial statements? Why are congregants never told how much comes in, how much goes out, and where it all goes? Why is it that the structure of financial management is kept behind closed doors, accessible only to an inner circle? Because if the truth came out, the illusion would fall apart. Accountability is not an enemy of faith, it is its foundation. It is how you protect the integrity of the mission. And yet, we've created a culture where questioning is treated as rebellion, where due diligence is mistaken for doubt, and where silence is rewarded with inclusion. But speaking up gets you labeled as the problem. But let me tell you this, silence is how systems rot. Silence is how abuse continues. And silence is how honest people get used, then discarded. You want to know the measure of any organization. Follow the money. Look at where it goes. Look at who benefits. Look at what impact it actually creates. If the church takes in millions but gives back crumbs, then it is no longer a ministry. It is a monument to greed, vanity, and unchecked power. But here's the thing, the power isn't just in the pulpit, it's in the people. And the moment the people start to demand clarity, the moment they start asking where, how, and why, everything changes, because institutions don't change from the top down, they shift from the ground up. When enough people stop giving blindly, the system has no choice but to reform. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be ashamed to demand transparency. Don't be silent when something doesn't add up. Your money is not just paper. It's a piece of your faith, your work, your life, and it deserves to be treated with respect. Churches that operate with integrity should have nothing to hide. They should welcome oversight. They should celebrate accountability, because when money is managed right, it multiplies trust. But when it's hidden, twisted, and abused, it multiplies doubt. This isn't about tearing down. It's about rebuilding right. About creating a culture where spiritual leadership is matched by financial responsibility. Where integrity isn't preached, it's practiced. Because at the end of the day, if the light of God is truly in the house, it should be able to shine on the books too. You walk into the building and it feels like a concert. Lights dimmed, fog machines running, the music hits, hands go up, and for a moment you feel something. It's emotional, powerful, addictive, but here's the question, was it spiritual? Or was it sensational? There's a difference. We've entered a generation where church feels less like a sanctuary and more like a shopping mall. You walk in, browse the message like a product, pick the pastor who suits your preferences, drop something in the basket if the performance was good, and walk out feeling fed. But this is not spiritual growth. This is spiritual consumerism. This is salvation sold like sneakers, limited edition, fast-moving, and only for those who can afford it. Faith has been commercialized, packaged, marketed. What used to be sacred is now staged, and it's subtle. They don't sell you Jesus anymore. They sell you the experience. And experience is profitable. They know how to hit the right notes. They've mastered the crescendo. They know the rhythm that will bring tears to your eyes. They know the language that keeps you coming back. Not because your soul is being transformed, but because your emotions are being entertained. And let me tell you, entertainment doesn't lead to elevation. They'll tell you, sow your seed, unlock your breakthrough. Partner with this ministry and watch your life change. Suddenly, prayer has a price tag. Deliverance comes with a debit slip. Prophecy sounds more like a sales pitch. And we, the people, have become customers instead of disciples. You don't build character in a marketplace. You build it in wilderness, but that doesn't sell. Struggle doesn't trend. Waiting in silence doesn't get views. So they give you quick fixes, shiny solutions. microwave miracles, and all you have to do is pay, pray, and post about it. But here's the truth. Real faith is inconvenient. It costs you before it rewards you, it strips you down before it elevates you. It calls you to sacrifice, not just donate, to grow, not just shout amen. But that message, that doesn't fill stadiums, that doesn't fund empires, because spiritual consumerism isn't about your transformation. It's about your transaction. It turns pastors into influencers, sermons into soundbites, devotion into dopamine. It creates a culture where you follow God only as long as He gives you what you want. And the moment He doesn't, you switch churches like brands. You unsubscribe from pain. You log out of anything that demands your patience, your discipline, your growth. You want on-demand of faith, convenient, curated, and fast. But there's no app for spiritual maturity. You can't download character. You can't leave stream wisdom. You can't binge, watch your way to depth. And until we confront this addiction to performance, we'll keep building churches that look full but feel empty. Buildings with thousands of people but no power, no presence, no purpose. It's time to stop feeding the beast. Stop rewarding spectacle with loyalty. Stop confusing vibes with vision. Just because the band plays well doesn't mean the message is true. Just because the pastor has a following doesn't mean he's leading you anywhere worth going. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were challenged to grow, not just feel good? When was the last time the message made you uncomfortable? Because it told you the truth, not just what you wanted to hear. If all you ever get is comfort, you're not being led. You're being sold to, and faith is not for sale. The greatest truths come not from stages but from silence, not from charisma but conviction, not from events but encounters, and those can't be bought. You have to seek them. Wrestle with them, sacrifice for them. So here's the shift. Stop approaching your faith like a customer. Start living it like a calling. Don't just show up, grow up. Ask for substance, not just style. Demand truth, not just theatrics. And if the place you go to worship starts looking more like a brand launch than a house of God, leave. Because the soul was never meant to be a consumer. It was meant to be a vessel. And no matter how good the show is, it can never replace the slow, unsexy, sacred work of real spiritual growth. You're not a customer, you're a seeker. And seekers don't shop, they search relentlessly, boldly, honestly, until they find truth, not just trends. Church should be sanctuary, not stage. Faith should liberate, not leash. And you, yes, you, should never bow to cover, props, charisma, or unchecked capital. So today, step away from blind devotion. Instead, step into responsible faith. May your questions be your compass, your accountability your anchor, and your community your strength.